What's up?
You can't write better fiction
What's up?
than what this dude's life is.
Give me a second.
He's insane.
Oh, there he goes.
Come here, Ryan.
Man, right in the room? You at least one. Oh, God.
Oh, that was good.
Ooh. Really bad. 2 fingers. That's it? You got that with 2 fingers, man. We got magic fingers.
But without further ado, is everyone ready?
I'm good.
Clink, clank, clunk, clink,
Clink, clank. Clink,
Hey,
clink, clank.
hey.
Clink,
This is not
clink,
a
clank.
branded podcast. Hello and welcome to Strange Happy Hour. I am one of your hosts, Britt the Jesterhead Metcalf, along to my right
Handsome John.
and on my left.
The dispatcher, Mark Clover.
That's right. Doesn't matter if we're in our quarantine edition part 5.
5.
Sounds fine.
Yeah.
We are still to the left and right of each other. I wish I remembered the Japanese word for 5 because I'd say that right now. However, we come to you each and every week, despite COVID-19, to discuss with you the nerdy video game news, comic book news, movies, entertainment, as well as technology here on this very show. However, there's not enough time to talk about everything, though. This week, I was afraid there was going to be plenty of time to talk about it because there's not a whole lot going on. We also surprisingly enough, of course, we did find out that we don't have time to talk about the fact that Nintendo is allowing the Switch to remap controls. That makes me very excited. We can't talk about the fact that Kevin Conroy will voice a Batman live-action reading of the new Batman Adventures Continue comic. And we don't have time to discuss the fact that the Dead Space creator is working with PUBG Corporation on a brand new game. Ooh. However, we do have time to talk about on this very show what we do each and every week together as one, despite the pandemic going around the globe, what we like to call the important shit. I was a little faster. I assume Mark will fix that. It's fine. Doesn't matter. I think we're going to start off with the dispatcher himself because Google looks like they're moving on to their own manufacturing.
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, they already do somewhat. So I guess to start off, like Google anyway needs like specialized hardware to do some stuff that they're doing because they're doing a lot more work with AI and TensorFlow work and things like that are a little bit more specialized and require a little bit more specialized processing. Like, for example, AI has more traditionally been done, or I guess in the later stages, done on graphics cards because that high core count, low CPU processing capability anyway, or throughput capability, has been more or better suited for that because like the multiple cases that you have to do small bits of processing for at one time. So there are better chips that have been created for AI specifically. Now, Google is heavily invested in AI to some extent, like the Pixel 4, for example, had the highest amount of AI in it known anyway for a mobile phone.
So I want to interrupt real quickly. What is a metric for determining how much AI is in a phone?
It's more of what it's used for, I guess.
Okay.
And what kind of things you're trying to model, because the depth of what you're trying to model, like what Google does with the human voice, as well as, or like voice detection, that kind of thing, or face detection, or object detection and imagery, text to speech or speech to text, that kind of thing from videos or things that you play on the phone, that kind of thing. Like different levels of it get more and more complex, that kind of thing. So
we have a metric now. Continue.
Basically, with the amount of AI that Google is implementing into these phones to improve battery life and run the operating system, improve processing performance and whatnot, they need a specialized chip for this. So with that, Google has actually moved to doing their own SoC, which is called a System on a Chip, which is what Qualcomm does with the Snapdragon line of processors currently with everyone else in their current mobile phones and whatnot. Apple being the only other company currently that develops their own SoCs for their devices, which is the reason why AirPods and the Apple Watch and iPhones and MacBooks and everything else exist with such capabilities anyway that they have. The idea is that the chips are designed specifically for the device and the software that's going on it, and vice versa. Software is built for the hardware. So if they bring all those pieces together. Apple has such a great ecosystem now and has such great performance because it's optimized correctly. Google is looking to do the same thing now by building their own chips for the next line of Pixel phones.
And so is Amazon, I'm sure.
Well, so actually, the funny part is Google does this already to some extent, but they do it behind the scenes. Now, they don't do it independently where they actually hand it off to another manufacturer directly. They get input from other companies and tell other companies or chip manufacturers how they want to design their server processors. Okay. So they've got specialized servers and specialized server processors and motherboards and things like that that are customized to what they need more specifically. They need better network throughput, for example. If they need AI processing, dedicated servers for that, for like Google Assistant, for example, they've got entire racks of those, that kind of thing. So this is something they've already done to some extent. The difference is that they're getting their hand really deep into this business line to improve their own devices. But it's mostly starting out with the mobile phone market. I'd be interested to see if this carries over to like the Chromebook market, for example, which isn't as big of a business case for them, but it would still be useful.
Well, yeah, I imagine they're going to, because Google seems to take a lot of their technology and try to spread it across the board, right? Mm-hmm. So something as simple as Google Docs, which was available from any computer, is now being utilized as the main word processor on Chromebook, and they're trying to make sure it's included on all Android phones. That way, It's easy to have access to. Like, it would be silly to not, but I agree, it's not the major business case here, right?
Right, and the point for them anyway is, and the reason, some of the reasons stated in the article was that they're looking for something built more in line with what Google Assistant actually needs. Right now, the way that most phone manufacturers go, that if you're not Apple, for the most part, you have pre-built processors from Qualcomm that require you to basically piece together these individual things that you need and slap them on a board that you then design to interconnect all the wires together and work. I mean, that's the basic of it anyway. But what you need to run, or what you really need to work on in particular, if you want to make your products better, or better as an overall anyway down the line, and the Pixel, Pixel devices, Samsung devices, and Apple devices, specifically the iPhone, Galaxy S series, and the Pixel series, have been the 3 most popular phones sold up to date. So having specialized processors for each of those and what their capabilities are makes the most sense. So Google's just taking the next step in that, just like Apple did. And so I'm excited to see this.
You think we're going to see other companies move in this direction? I mean, the major smartphone manufacturers right now are Google and Apple, so it's kind of hard to determine who else. When it comes to like the OS side of things, I know that Android's built in a way where Samsung's able to like put layers on top of it, and Huawei and the rest of them, but typically there's a baseline they kind of stick with. So do you think somebody else is going to head this direction, or
it's the only company I would see going? Well, so Amazon might, if they had a foot in this, that kind of thing. The only thing that Amazon I could see, and they may already do this, I don't know offhand, but the only thing that they could probably use is a built-in feature or customized chips for for servers, just like Google does. They got their own things for shopping and for analytics and whatnot, and better yet for AWS that they would need to offer, that they may have specialized processors for, which would make sense. Yeah. The problem is Amazon doesn't really fit into some of the niche markets like the mobile phone market, the smartwatch market, the smart the true wireless headphone market, that kind of thing, where they would need specialized processors like that, as opposed to Apple or Google, who are in those marketplaces very heavily and would need that kind of thing. The only company that would be left to step into this kind of space would be Samsung. But by that notion, Samsung is the provider for most of these chips. Specifically, Samsung is aiding Google in this process. Okay. Like, they're actually helping them with the manufacturing process of this, just like they do with Apple. Because most of Apple's chips are actually manufactured through Samsung. Like, even though they're their own packages and Apple, builds them, that kind of thing, Samsung vets them and then hands them over to manufacturing to be able to build them. Since Samsung is such a wide manufacturer like this. And I'd have to double check this, but I believe actually Samsung still uses Qualcomm chips. I don't think they use anything specialized for themselves, which means that they would be the next logical ones to take that step. But I'd have to double check, but I don't know offhand if they already do or not. But it's still an interesting space to be in, as opposed to taking a built for all Qualcomm chip, having specialized chips that are built for each of these. The problem is it's a very specialized thing to build.
Yeah.
Because then you have to build the motherboards for the phones to match. And usually it's a 1-to-1 comparison, which is nice. Like usually you build one chip, like Apple, for example, they build one chip for one iPhone and then build a motherboard to match it. Maybe 2 motherboards or 3 motherboards, depending on how many different lines of phones they come out with, but it's pretty specialized.
So with
Unless
all
you
that
came out with a line of phones that would be, I guess, that would need it, there'd be no reason to do it unless you had the numbers. I mean, it wouldn't be, not for the specialized stuff.
Well, I also wonder a little bit, like we have, you have Amazon, like you're talking about, they have all these smart devices, right? You have the Fire Stick, Fire TV, like they're trying to move that direction. I agree that I don't think it's a large enough market, but if they're going to try and expand, I imagine they're going to have to move into the other spaces as well. Not necessarily phone, but smart earbuds and other things around.
I mean, Amazon Basics is a pretty big company as it is, but if I recall correctly, that's a subsidized thing, similar to what grocery stores do with name brands.
Mm-hmm.
Like those products are made by name brand companies, just like the store brand allergy medication may be manufactured by Claritin, and it's the same product. It's just rebranded a different way and lowered in price. I think it's, if I recall correctly, it's done similarly. But
cereal companies do the same stuff. But I could also see Amazon selling or allowing other cell phone companies to utilize Alexa as a draw to say, I've already got pretty much everything Amazon in my house, between the Ring, I use Amazon quite a bit, or the Show and all that other stuff.
So the only upward benefit that would happen there is having Alexa built into, and I realize I say that there's a device in the room here, but
Alexa,
the Echo devices, to have that built-in voice functionality is already something you can do on any Android phone. You can install the app, similar to what you can do with Google Assistant, but the benefit would be to have it integrated at the core of the operating system, as opposed to just on the surface, like through an app. Similar to what Google Assistant people have to do with iPhones. Siri is a built-in thing, and you cannot replace it with Google Assistant. Apple doesn't let you do that. So what people end up doing is pressing and holding the power button or whatever it is to enable Siri, to then tell it to open Google Assistant, to then tell it a voice command of what to do, because that's the only way to do it. So if you're heavily in the Alexa environment or the Amazon environment, you would have to do the same thing currently. But if they built into the mobile phone space, or let's say they partnered with OnePlus or something like that, the kind of thing to integrate Alexa as a core OS component, then I could see that maybe being a difference. But I also don't think that Amazon holds any kind of major share in the smart home market anymore. I think they're falling off way too quick, and Samsung, Apple, and Google are easily taking the cake on this one.
I think that's fair. I mean, I also feel like they're not pushing the same way. Whether or not they have the money to do so is kind of an argument. I know Amazon has lots of money, but they also spread themselves quite thin, I would argue, compared to these other organizations.
I don't want to argue that Google spreads themselves a little bit more thin. The difference is they've got a bigger revenue stream coming in because they're more established.
Yeah, I also don't think they care as much on losses. I think they've proven that time and time again on various projects, whereas Amazon's very, very oh, you can play it's in their weekly deals. We'll talk about it later. But I mean, they just kind of try things and see if they work. And if they don't work the way they expected, then they say, fuck it, whatever. We'll just move on to the next thing.
Cut the program, keep moving.
Yeah, I think they're completely content with that. Whereas Amazon, I think, is way more bullish about their cash.
Oh, yeah. Easy.
They should be.
I mean, well, but that's a Jeff Bezos thing. He's very much one of those, if you don't like it, then shut up and deal. Like, if you don't like the way that I spend my money, shut up and deal with it. Like that's legitimately it. Like, because somebody had asked him once about why he doesn't do charitable giving. He's like, because I don't want to.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's nothing that says you have to, I guess,
You're allowed to be an asshole. That's true.
But
his first thing is why don't you start first?
Yeah. No, but I guess I'm interested to see where Google goes with this, because if they're building out their own chips, that means that every other device gets slightly improved down the line anyway. All their all the Nest products get upgraded down the line because they end up with their own dedicated processors for this.
That's true.
Watches, if they decided to go back into Pixel and rebuild the Pixel Watch, which may have been the reason for the delay on this because it's been so rumored and leaked for a long time. The Pixel Watch could get its own dedicated processor, just like the Apple Watch does, which is the reason why it's so successful. Pixel Buds could also get their own processors, just like the AirPods do, which is the reason the AirPods are so successful too, is because they seamlessly integrate. If you can build these things in with custom chips, I don't see why you can't make yourself a better company all around, or offer better products all the way around.
Not only that, why would you not, right? I mean, if you're going to invest in this market, you're already spending the money. You might as well make the best product available. I mean, people know these things are expensive. You're not buying a decent phone for less than $600, $800. You're not buying these these earbuds that are connected through Bluetooth without spending $200 to $400. Like, It is what it is. So if you're going to go ahead and go for it, you might as well go all the way.
Spend the extra money on spend the whatever extra money on the engineering instead of paying a third party company to have already done the engineering and everything. And then just build it in house to make it even better than it would have been if you had just tried to puzzle piece this together.
Well, and Google is known for innovation in various ways. They're known for also dropping projects, but they're known for innovation. So if they come up with a way in which these chips are incredibly fast and are easier to integrate than others, not only are they able to do it on their own products, but now we're going to open source it like Android. You can use these chips, and here's what you need to do. You just got to pay for a license.
Yep, I'm excited. I'm excited for the day that Google products are regaled for the same way that Apple products are for their performance. I'm excited for that day.
Yeah, agreed. Please let us know what you think about custom processors coming to Google products in the comments floating above John, because he's got this beautiful painting behind him. And what better to go with it than Google processors?
Sure.
Now that I'm on my next beer, it's time to move on to Handsome John. We're going to talk about the ESRB. He puts in one topic about game delays, but I want to talk about another as well. So you start.
So a lot of people were actually kind of worried that with the coronavirus thing going on, that games were going to be delayed because of, I wouldn't say stupid things. They're kind of, you wish were a little bit less consequential, like things like your ESRB rating and your PEGI rating, Peggy at 10.
And don't forget Sero.
Sero?
Sero.
Yeah.
That's for Asia.
China.
China.
The good news is that they have all been impacted minimally. For a lot of what they do, they work with people that are in other countries and they're used to this kind of work. So working from home hasn't impacted their delays or anything that would be considered for a delay, minimally, if not at all. So everybody has no worries that the ESRB is going to impact the release of other games. At least it won't be their fault.
So what's super interesting about this is I was listening to another podcast, as I do in my free time. And one of the things they brought up is the fact that the ESRB is designed to handle this because it's all done internally. However, Peggy and Sero both work with volunteers within the industries in Europe and Asia to get these ratings done correctly. So they actually hand off games to people to work on them, to come into an office and play them on machines they have next to them. So unlike the ESRB, which has the capability of basically running themselves locally, because the way the ESRB works is that they send out a video. So basically you as a game designer or a game developer would be like, hey, here's our video of what we believe is the worst thing in our game. So here's the most sexually explicit thing. Here's the most violent thing. Here's the worst case of cussing. And we're going to give you a clip reel. And so because of that, they're able to just take those clip reels home with them and rate games. As long as the developers are still providing that information, it's easy for them to get it. So they don't have to worry about central computers in which everything's kind of locked down and made sure there's no leaks coming through. But the other industries or other countries are not ready for this, which is interesting.
I'm really glad the ESRB doesn't do that, because they would probably give all of their all copies and whatnot over to the crazies, and they're like, nope, this is adult only. This is adult only.
Well,
They're like, yeah, all that happened was Bambi's dad got shot. That was the only. It's like adult only.
the thing about the ESRB that's fascinating is the fact that it is self-regulation from the industry. So even though they kind of combat with the industry from time to time, it is people who work in video games. It's not governmental people. It's a completely
was made to keep the government out.
Correct. In the 90s, the government was like, hey, Mortal Kombat, you can tear people's heads off. That's a problem. And they're like, no, we got this. Ed Boon, you're a bastard, but we got this. We'll take care of it. And so they self-regulated.
With the rating system with movies.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it is interesting to hear that they're continuing on. And not only are they continuing on, they made an announcement yesterday about including a new label for microtransactions now. So there's an industry.biz article there.
I'm glad to see that they're not bottlenecking, I guess, the entire industry, because you kind of have to have the rating before it'll show up on most shelves anyway. So
not just physical shelves, digital shelves. PlayStation, PSN, Xbox Live, and the eShop will not allow a game that does not have an ESRB rating. Period.
Interesting. Well, because like for a lot of game publishers, especially in the completely online era that we're in now, for example, EA, Ubisoft, anybody who publishes to Steam, for example, like those sites don't have to take an ESRB rating, but they still publish with them and still require them because that's what most parents go to whenever they try to look for it, or they've already got things in place for it. So I'm actually glad to see that they're not trying to, or they're actually moving into this online space to keep from bottlenecking anything new that would be coming, even through the issues that we've been having.
Yeah, and what's fascinating to me too is the fact that. You're right. Like EA is not required to do any ESRB rating. Neither is Ubisoft and these other major publishers.
But they still do. So,
but they do because of the fact that it allows them to be, I guess, protect themselves. Right. If there's ever a court case, if there's ever anything comes up where children got a hold of content they shouldn't have, they can go and say, guess what? It is in our company guidelines. This is a standard. You don't get around this.
I forget, because we've had this discussion before, I think. Doesn't the ESRB rating of like M or AO actually affect the legal age at which you can purchase the game?
Correct.
And that's a legal thing, too, from a private company that just does independent ratings.
Quite literally their standard that says if it is not people 18 or only to 18 or older. And I don't believe there's actually, as far as I know, there is no law and there's been no penalties as far as I know with any kid playing a game that is M rated or higher.
It reminds me of like going to see a rated R, right? If you go to see a rated R film and you're under 18, there's nobody who's going to come and put you in cuffs. Like there's no legal precedence for it. It's just that they have their own standards. As a movie theater, they don't allow people to see a movie that's under that rating.
Yeah, they follow the Motion Picture Association's rating that says that it's an R-rated movie.
It's the same thing here.
Behold the day that SWAT team comes in. Where's that 14-year-old? Get him.
But I think the goal is to, again, prevent it to go to a legal standard, right? You don't want to have a legal standard saying you have to be 18 to buy video games, rated M games, because then you're literally on the same level as most states are until recently for tobacco. Like you don't want to have that association.
I was never once carded when buying a game.
No, I bought Devil May Cry when I was like 14. It's a rated M game. Like numerous versions of that game repeatedly.
Unless it was like well known, the kids are not to play this game. Do not sell a kid this game.
Yeah, Grand Theft Auto, I think, and Manhunt are the two examples that I can think of. Manhunt 2 was not allowed to be released in Australia. It was a terrible game, but it was really cool.
Okay. So in the US, it's not regaled as law. In Canada, ESRB ratings are enforced under provincial laws by the film rating boards.
Wow.
Now, is that every province, or is that all provinces?
As in the U.S., most retailers voluntarily enforce the ratings regardless.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to live in some socialist state where they tell me what age I can buy games. Keep your free health care.
Okay, Dylan.
We're in a pandemic. I need the health care over what games I buy. Oh, God.
But
God.
no, I find this I find it good that they're still moving on. What was the other bit you just added here? Oh, the new microtransaction label. I like that a lot. I'm curious to see how that's actually implemented on packaging.
So if you actually click on the link, you can see it. And folks, you can click on the description above Mark, swirling like a cloud of anger. Because I always say above him. There should be an image, I believe.
Above John earlier, but
there's not. Okay.
No, there's no image of it.
So the ESRB ratings, what happens is on the front they have the letter rating, so E, T, M, whatever, and on the back there's a label that has the rating and then descriptors. One of those descriptors that is required for microtransaction games loot box games is it says something along the lines of like, this game has boxes with random chance or something along that lines. So that way it explains the fact that you can spend money on things that aren't guaranteed.
I don't know why they just didn't say microtransactions also, because I mean, you can have microtransactions and like there's no random chance. There's the difference between the two. So did they differentiate?
It's loot boxes. I apologize. I'll fix that in our little document here because it is specifically for enhance. It is specifically for loot boxes. It doesn't matter about DLC. It doesn't matter about, in Division, you could literally spend money on clothes if you want, or you could spend money on loot boxes. There's a difference between the two.
Mm-hmm.
So this Division 2 would have a rating for the loot box because they're included. So it is cool. I'm excited.
I can't seem to find any place where it actually talks about it. Everything that I'm seeing right now is about the in-game purchases label, which has always been on these packages.
Yeah, if you literally Google ESRB loot box label, you can find an image of it. Because I did that earlier, and I was like, "Oh, look at that!"
I did ESRB microtransactions, but I'll look it up.
How about new label? How about that? In-game purchases including random items. That's what it says. In-game purchases including random items.
Oh, okay. So that's what that is. Because the other thing I had seen was actually a G rating for gambling.
Oh, yeah. So
no, I'm sorry. Don't take that. That's not correct. Don't worry about that.
Okay.
Disregard that.
I'll just forget it. What I find fascinating is the process of the ESRB. I just learned, and granted, I don't think they're hiding it, but I kind of laugh at this idea of like, no, we're gonna rate a game not by playing it. Not by getting the context of it. The developer's just going to send us a clip of the worst thing possible. And games get re-rated all the time. Manhunt 2 I brought up earlier, but it was actually re-rated by the board because in Australia, Rockstar went back and cut a lot of content, or something may happen. But it's just funny to me that like there's like, hey, here's our game. Here's some clips. Look at it.
I'm gonna be like that Vita game where they're just sitting there going, I don't know what's wrong. This game's great.
Yeah. See, maybe you guys can answer this for me because I don't know if maybe everyone knows, just like I don't. But how did the ESRB do ratings beforehand?
So the ESRB has always done ratings this way.
Really? Just been sent clips of like whatever the game developer deems is the worst?
Because the ESRB did not exist until the late 90s.
Yeah.
Mid 90s, mid to late 90s.
Because I would have been surprised if they didn't get sent like beta versions, alpha versions of the game, for example, to give ESRB ratings on these.
Well, arguably, it was probably even harder back then because you'd literally have to send like a ROM,
physical cartridge or something like that for a console that may not even exist yet.
Unless it was really late into the NES lifespan, I don't remember seeing an ESRB rating on it.
It was so Mortal Kombat.
Yes,
1 stirred shit. 2 was when it got worse, and I think 3 is when they're like, okay, we gotta do something.
See, I'm curious with this because, like, to me, this almost sounds like self-rating to some extent. Like, and maybe this is an ESRB core process, so like obviously, like it hasn't changed over the course of 2 decades, basically.
Does it all the time. I did a really good job.
Oh God, I don't want to talk about that from today. I don't want to talk about that.
I'm allowed to vote by mail. Nobody else is. I'm allowed to.
I get to talk about that. But anyway, like I'll equate it almost to like like being a motorcycle rider. Motorcycle helmet ratings for the DOT standard and the ECE standard are self. I forget if the EC standard. I know the DOT standard is. DOT standard is a self-rated thing where they literally just tell the federal DOT that says, "Yep, we're good."
No,
Yep.
but that's
Yep, we meet everything. Here's our score sheet that says this is how our helmet did. So we're going to slap a sticker on the back of it with a number on it based on whatever number you give us. And that's
let me
it.
tell you, they do not want to be sued if it doesn't make those standards.
Well, so that's the.
Child seats had a huge issue in the side impact where it would say that it was side impact rated, but they didn't say what that side impact rating was. That was the only reason they didn't get sued into oblivion.
But what I'm saying is, like, it's still self-certification, that kind of thing, unless someone decides that they're going to pose a lawsuit or to say that it doesn't meet the FDOT standards. I'd say this is one step away from that, because the ESRB still looks at this and says, yes, this is M, this is T, this is AO, whatever, you know.
And again, I think they cover their own ass because they will go back and re-rate something. They will re-rate something based on time, context, if people complain, that kind of thing.
But that doesn't change the marketing and the purchase history and everything up to that point.
Correct.
Well, the impact is monetarily changeable. I would agree with that, because M-rated games, I think back in the day, didn't sell as well as other rated games.
M-rated games to this day, the exception being Grand Theft Auto 5. Literally the only exception to this rule. M-rated games sell less than T games. Like anything below it, guaranteed.
Isn't
Red Dead Redemption 2 did not sell that well. God of War sold okay. Like, it sold good for a PlayStation 4 exclusive, but it's not like Horizon Zero Dawn's a T.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
That's awesome. I didn't realize. I thought that was.
Yeah, that's why most Sony exclusives are T. If you look at it, if you look at their actual plethora and their actual like catalog,
I would.
Last of Us.
No, that's fair. But to get back to the point, his DOT certification was about mortality rates.
Yes,
and is also something suable if it doesn't meet a specific standard that they said it met.
Easier to sue, I would say, because you can still sue on the fact that like you're being lied to.
But the impact to a person that played a game that was mature when he was 16 or 17 is not going to be.
I agree.
Crucial unless you're an evangelical.
I agree entirely. I'm just saying the reason why.
But I like that. I did not know that, Mark. That's very interesting.
You want to? What you want to look? I'll have to look up the actual rating. I forget now off the top of my head. There is a type of rating that requires the helmets to be sent off, but that's beside the point. What I was looking at actually, because you were talking about Grand Theft Auto, which Grand Theft Auto is still one of the highest it is to Grand
this
Theft Auto
day
5 is the highest selling, one of the highest selling games
all time.
All time.
Technically, they think Tetris sold more, but there's no actual numbers for it. So now,
is that over all the iterations? That's not even fair. That's like quite literally 50 years.
The OG Tetris.
The OG Tetris. Like they're talking legit the OG Tetris on Game Boy. They believe sold more, but there's not enough metrics for it. So currently, the only game we have the most metrics for would be Grand Theft Auto with Minecraft right behind it.
I would have because you were talking about that being the highest selling or the like that being the best one from like rated M for mature to be the barrier breaker. I'd almost argue that Call of Duty is along those same lines, because all of the Call of Duty games have been M for mature because of blood content, shooting, language, the whole deal.
That's true. That is true. That's that again.
I would put Call of Duty right up there with it, because Call of Duty also being one of the more popular games of our lifetime, of course, just from not game series of our lifetime, but I'd put that up there with it. Oh, 100%.
Yeah. I would probably wrap up Call of Duty as a whole, because every year, sometimes twice a year, they put out another game that sells insane amounts, and to try to make it up in the same bundle is not unfair, because most of them are very alike anyway.
Well, my favorite part is to make the games better, they actually rotated in a third developer now.
Yeah.
So that each company has 3 years or 2 years or whatever to work on the next game that they've got instead of one.
It's 3 years because you have three. You have Treyarch. You have
Treyarch, Infinity Ward, Activision's the publisher. I forget the third company that's in there now.
Sledgehammer.
That's it.
Yep. So everyone gets 3 years because there's 3 of them now. You rotate between
one.
It makes sense. I mean, it makes sense from their standpoint. To continue on with the topic, we'll come back with these statistics. Maybe even next episode, I'll do a little segment because I'm going to look into some of this stuff. I'm very curious about it. But good to know that ESRB will not be up like holding back games, right?
Yeah.
So even though some major releases, Sony already said they're delaying The Last of Us. I imagine Ghost of Tsushima is next.
Yeah, that's where a lot of the worry came from. They're like, okay, but don't worry, your disc makers, as far as I know, that's not changing.
Correct. So I think for the most part, we're going to see games continue to release. Whether major games release will be up to publishers. So,
yeah.
But let us know what your thoughts are on the ESRB. They're moving forward, how they do their job, and the new label on loot boxes. Why not? Floating in the comments above me because I'm so sprightly.
So cute.
Oh,
Are you
finally
really?
moving on to our final topic of the show. And this one is a little bit more of an emotional topic, but I wanted to talk about it because I am on chapter 16 of 18 out of 18 on the Final Fantasy VII remake.
Wait, you're on 18?
16 out of 18.
Oh, I was about to say,
yeah.
Let's just finish Final Fantasy and then we'll go play Division.
I believe the question I posed to the group here is, what makes a good remake? And I want to kind of go over some ideas. There he is. We got him. Don't worry, folks.
I was lost temporarily. It's okay.
Oh, man. Internet age is weird. So what makes a good remake, right? So, A, what are the criteria for remake? Is it simply remastering and re-releasing, which we've seen on video games before, which,
yeah,
they do it in movies too, where you get the Blu-ray upgrade, where it's now 4K and an HD rather than, is that a good standard?
Would be a good
yeah. Is that a remake or a remaster? Because I would
definitely
argue
a remake.
You think it's a remake?
Yeah, I really do.
Well, so there's no hard definition that every developer is going to follow for this. Of course, I mean, like for example, like Final Fantasy VII, for example, is considered a remake because. As far as if I remember correctly from what we had talked about before, they had actually lost the original code for that, so they had to rebuild it from the ground up.
Well, not that, but it's a reimagination. Like,
correct.
There's a specific level of which you go for. I'm playing Tetris now. When you go from playing Tetris to like I don't know the Tetris on Tetris VR, like it is a remake because it is obviously a different game built on a different system.
But see,
so there are the system requirements that are changing, but it's really the soul.
So hold on. So the definition of a remake is make something again or differently, or a movie or piece of music that has been filmed or recorded again and re-released.
So then technically is
your definition of Vanquish would not be a remake, it'd be a remaster. Because they didn't remake that from scratch. Nor is it different.
I don't know. It was a PS3, was it not? So how could they reutilize anything before? It had to.
See, I almost don't like that definition of remake because technically a sequel could almost be a remake if you really wanted to talk about that way. Because it's not talking about like the whole thing being the same. It's just talking about bringing similarities from one to the next. Like
to me, remaster is still playing Final Fantasy VII in its original PS4. That is a remaster.
So a remaster would be what they released on PS4 3 years ago, which is exactly what you're talking about. It is playing Final Fantasy VII on PS4. You are playing Vanquished on PS4. Mm-hmm. So it's the same game as the PS3. It just looks nicer.
As far as I know, that can't be
It can't be. You literally can't take like a ROM for a PS3 and make it over. You have to put work into it. But it's like taking Devil May Cry 3 from PS2 and putting it on PS4.
Well, so my question is, like, Halo, for example, was considered the new Halo stuff was considered a remaster. Yes. Halo and Halo 2 were rebuilt, but it was rebuilt with the same engine but better graphics. So that is still a remaster. It's not a remake technically because it's all still the same engine, still the same entity, still the same, roughly the same animation anyway. But the difference is that the graphics were just upgraded to match the modern age. So
to guide this conversation, I have a list of across different mediums, not just what we have here. So an example, Final Fantasy VII Remake, which I'm going to dive into, of course. We have the Ratchet and Clank 2016 game, which came out in 2016. It is a reimagining of just Ratchet and Clank for PS4. It is a reimagining of the original game using not only like nicer graphics, but changing up the flow, the combat, adding weapons, enemy types, that kind of thing. There are Netflix adaptations we've seen where we've seen most of them poor, but Death Note being that would be a remake of what Death Note is. And then remakes also come when you're talking about films, they come across language barriers, or time barriers. So the original Ocean's 11 came out with the Rat Pack in the 1950s. They included Frank Sinatra. We have the newest one that came out in the early 2000s. We have The Wicker Man, which again is a 1970s film re-released in the early 2000s under a different moniker here.
It's different people, it's different backgrounds.
Correct. The Departed is a remake of a internal investigation, which is a Asian film from the 1980s. The Little Shop of Horrors is a remake of a play into film format. So there's all kinds of criteria here, but I really wanted to kind of dial down into what do you think makes a good remake?
Little Shop of Horrors to me wouldn't be a remake. That would be a transition piece or
an adaptation. I'd call it an adaptation.
There you go.
No, because it literally changes the story context and the ending of it.
It does.
Still
you're right.
It can change. It's adapting. That's the meaning of it.
But an adaptation would be changing. Now, I don't know. Maybe you could pull up Brent. You could pull up the definition
right now.
But adaptation to me would be like the remake,
Fuck you, encyclopedias,
or the changing of something with the same core elements for the purpose of a different medium. So, for example, like Little Shop of Horrors is traditionally a play, and I can relate well to this one because in high school we did Little Shop of Horrors, so I know this story pretty well. We had to watch the movie, the whole deal. Yeah. But watching the movie and seeing the play and going through the script anyway changes it a little bit, but they changed core elements because they needed to for the film. Mm-hmm. Not because necessarily they had to change the core elements necessarily, but like, or probably could have found a different filmistic way
there's a lot of stuff that happens in plays that you're not going to be able to reproduce in movies to make it good. So you have to change that to make it flow with the movie well. And the same thing goes where movies are made into plays.
But if it's part of the core plot, I'd argue that that's almost a remake, not necessarily an adaptation then, because it's a spin-off or in the for those who are
plot stays the same, and the only way is that it's slightly changed how they got there, very much like Final Fantasy VII Remake. I would say that would still be considered an adaptation of if you wanted to call it an adaptation remake of.
See,
you can make it long.
I'm sorry. Like your definition of an adaptation. 7 remake, which is a
remake. It is changing. It has some change to it, but the overall plot is the same.
But exactly. So your definition would be this is an adaptation, not a remake.
In the Little Shop of Horrors sense.
But why is Final Fantasy VII Remake different than Little Shop of Horrors?
Because it's in the same realm of genre. It is a video game. It's not.
Actually, Brent, I'm with you.
Brother movie. To the Mario Brothers game, that would be an adaptation. So we have.
Brent, I would almost go side and I understand where you're coming from with this. Where Final Fantasy VII Remake would be an adaptation.
Technically, according to this definition, yes.
Or actually, to some extent, it's almost just a remaster. There's no major change of the game, is it?
The adaptation is going from one set live to another set being video. So you're going from a live performance to a video adaptation.
But you're changing
from
core
the same
things,
medium, video game, into a remake.
But my example of Halo, for example, didn't change core functionality, didn't change the input, didn't change the engine, didn't change the underlying features. Which, in my opinion, is the definition of a remake rather than an adaptation. For example, if they had just taken straight up Halo Combat Evolved and then rebuilt it as it was.
Anniversary edition?
Well, no. Let's just, it's already available on PC anyway, but let's just say for the sake of the argument, they rebuilt it for Xbox One. But it was the same core game, same engine, same graphics, the whole deal. That to me is an adaptation. But if they upgrade it with the Halo 5 engine and new graphics, that to me is a remake.
No, that would be a remaster.
I'm gonna
Not if it's a different engine and a whole deal. Like that to me is a remake.
Why wouldn't it be? How else would you remaster something with better graphics. And
So
same way they did Halo Combat Evolved and Halo 2 in the Master Chief Collection. It's the same underlying engine.
It was all there beforehand. The processing of the Xbox wasn't able to handle it. Then they made the Anniversary Edition, which was the original game technically,
but it's
made into what you could actually see what they wanted.
Right. But it's just upgraded graphics. That's all it is. It's a remaster.
So that's what the Halo Master Chief Collection is, for the most part. It is essentially upgraded graphics. They did not change the combat. They did not change the controls. They did not change the map layout. They didn't change the story. Nothing changed other than that. Now they put
for Little Shop of Horrors, the story actually changed.
Yeah, I want to move away from that.
It's an adaptation remake. That's fine.
Let's pull back from that because it's way too much.
Like
the Little Shop of Horrors thrown off to the side. I'm even going to delete it.
You can't just get rid of you don't like you.
we're moving away from the conversation here. Casino Royale is another great example where Casino Royale was actually written and released in the 1950s and then once again here in the early 2010s.
I'm learning something brand new here, by the way. I did not know that.
Yeah. And so the funny part about the original movie is that they did not have the license. So they basically loosely followed the book, but not really. And it doesn't star James Bond, whereas this newer version is a James Bond story. So
interesting.
Looking at Final Fantasy VII Remake, it is only a portion of the game. It is not the full story of the original Final Fantasy VII. However, I would argue this is probably one of the best remakes I've ever seen, only because they have taken what was very simple and honestly kind of, I guess, tropey and written it into a story that involves characters that you care about, has good combat, has a world that fills out, and looking at other examples.
It fills out in a way that it couldn't beforehand. And
correct.
To me, that's the difference between the remake and the remaster. The remaster is that of everything behind technology. You can go from NES to PS5 if you wanted to. That is a remaster. As long as you're not changing the pathway or you are adding things to clarify, like in the sense of what we were talking about, spoiler alerts for Final Fantasy VII, very minor. There are characters who either get hurt or die off that you didn't really may or may not have happened in the original, but is clarified in this. Also, there are things that change completely. So therefore, the remake is saying we are remaking the path of this story, whereas the remaster is saying we are giving you an updated res version of this, and that's pretty much as far as you can go with it.
Well, and that's how I feel about Ratchet and Clank 2016. But I think there's an interesting wrinkle in the Shadow of the Colossus 2019 release, because it is the same game with prettier graphics, which is what we just said about Halo. However, there is a different control scheme if you choose it. So does that affect it? Is it still a remastered in that regard?
No,
because video games,
you're going to play with a different controller from.
I lost him.
Yeah, I lost all his audio there.
Yeah.
Oh, I say you're going to play with a different controller from an NES to a PS5 anyway.
So this Shadow of the Colossus was a PS2 game up to PS4. This is a remake? They call it a remake themselves, which is why I'm labeling.
I'm just saying in general, if you wanted to go between consoles, you would play with a different controller. That doesn't make it a remake. That just gives you different controllers.
See, well, so if it's a different, like in my opinion, that would be considered an adaptation.
Yeah, because it's not like, hey,
if it's
your
exactly
DualShock
the same
4
game
has different buttons. We're going to map it to that. It is literally the game controls differently if you go with this control scheme.
That's a remaster. You were literally benefiting the graphics and the control scheme in order to make it better.
I find this conversation interesting.
I'm going to make this a little bit more interesting. What would you call the Grand Theft Auto 5 build for PC, which took a full year after console released with upgraded graphics, brand new control schemes, and everything? What would you call the game
released on PC?
But it came a year later.
So it came a
full year later.
A lot of games come a year later after it releases on console.
On a different platform?
So
PC mostly.
What other games done that though?
Assassin's Creed, I think.
No, the Assassin's Creed. Well, the previous Assassin's Creed, yes, not the newer ones. The newer ones are released day and date. But Horizon Zero Dawn literally is coming to this summer.
But what would you call that? Would you call that a remaster?
No.
So here's the question. Because one,
and you get better graphics anyway.
But it's but then would it be considered an
directly on your console?
But if it's the same game, would you call it an adaptation?
No, because it's staying within the same genre and the same realm. It's still a game as a game.
The question is like, all right, so we're not changing the control scheme.
No, it's not.
It is. It's a console versus PC.
That's not changing a medium is in the sense of a video game is a video game. Changing the medium is saying a play to a video.
I agree with that. Like going from like a book to a movie to a song, like however you do it, that's a different medium.
Okay.
PC and like consoles are still video game.
Yep.
John just flipped you off, by the way, in case you were.
No, that was this figure.
So it sounds to me like our definition has to be, if you're talking about remastering something, it has to impact the piece in a significant manner. In video games, it can impact simply control schemes, but how you control the game does matter. Simply changing graphics doesn't matter. Right? I mean, that's what we're on the basis here, because we talked about the Halo and just changing the graphics does not make it a remaster. It makes it, or makes a remaster, not a remake.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure we have a flat understanding of what makes a good remake.
We're just going to leave adaptation completely out of this because we got into a real big argument on
that. No, it was actually a really good distinction because it's something that a lot of people probably would look at, and I'm sure you could confuse a lot of these terminologies, but at the same time, like the remake and remastered, and they everybody puts their fancy words in front of it that they want to, because technically, I mean, the name for Final Fantasy Remastered is not even the full Final Fantasy VII game. It's a part of it. Yeah. It's actually a part one, or whatever they're going to end up calling the second one. I'm not sure yet.
Is it called Remastered or is it called Remake?
It's called Remake. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, I guess my thing is, there's no, just to clarify for everyone watching or listening, there's no official terminology that says remastered versus remake here.
Correct.
Companies can kind of call it whatever they want to call it.
We're trying to make it.
Yeah. We're putting our own definition here and trying to spit this out, even though we got into a massive argument about something that doesn't matter. But
what's going to be more interesting is that John and I have seen, and I highly recommend you do, Mark, but the director and writer of that is basically going to rework that film into a series for HBO. So how does that fall into our definition? Because it's literally the same creator.
It depends on the rework.
It's an adaptation.
Is it just a refilm of the same script? Oh, God.
You're changing mediums, John. You're changing mediums.
Yeah, that's true. It is a remake.
So
I would say,
but see, that's the thing. Is it the same? Is it the same script?
So that'd be no difference than going from live show to movie, or book to show, or book to movie. It would still be an adaptation.
So would you call would you call them like
same medium,
basically Netflix
you
making?
have to adapt it from a movie to a show. There's no way around that.
So what would you call Netflix taking Death Note from like the Japanese films?
A piece of shit. Atrocity.
That was good.
A viable offense to those who like that show.
Because I think we can agree, like Ocean's 11 to Royale Casino, that's a remake. Like we were pretty definitive on that. Okay. So what about something like The Departed, which comes from Eternal Affairs, which is an Asian film? Is that a remake? Is that an adaptation? You think it's an adaptation?
You're and the only reason I say that, no,
because you're literally the same.
It's a remake.
Yeah,
it's a remake. But I mean, the reason the adaptation comes in is strictly because of the language barrier.
Mm-hmm.
And there will be different choices made for it, which could technically change some of the pathway that which people, and culturally, because it's an adaptation, you have cultural differences, which also would affect how the movie is looked upon. Though I will give it a remake in the sense that you are changing the pathway for that same reason within the same medium.
Mm-hmm. And of course, including new actors, new script, other stuff.
Yeah, that to me would classify as a remake, because I mean, technically, you're taking the same plot line, you're just rebuilding it. I guess, to make more sense for different cultures. So,
Yeah.
but the actual actions are different though.
But you could say, I mean, you're adapting it to this country. It's the U.S. When you talk about different movies, like for instance, Parasite, if they horribly ever decide to make an English version of this movie, which if they
Someone will.
I have lost all respect for them.
Well, I'll say I think they're protected because they won an Oscar. And in that regard, people are like, we're not going to touch it.
No, don't talk bad about them. What else? No, like the first ever. Can't do it. But don't worry, our president will bitch about it.
Yeah. God. So one final wrinkle into this, because why not? Musical covers. Like, what are those for? Because I feel like there is a distinction between...
Same thing.
Remake. Different artist. Remake.
Like, say if you're going from like, I don't know, I made it in my basement to using an orchestra, that would be remake. That would be remastering it.
That's that's remastering. That I would agree, because it's the same song, the same original idea, just
Now,
built
Billie
in a
Eilish
different
did it,
sense.
that would be a remake.
Yeah, but it's like the idea is like the core of it's based on the original artist. So for example, if like I Want It That Way comes out by like Panic at the Disco, then that's going to be technically a remake. Mm-hmm. It's the same song by a completely different artist. But now the reason that I think this is
how it's given too. They like the choruses will change up a little bit. Like say if
they may change some lyrics.
They're going to change the tempo, the way it's played, that kind of thing. So like some core things of it are going to be different.
Instead of saying like go away, they'll be like fuck off.
Wow.
I'm really glad I brought this up. It's been a while since we had a conversation. It was bedlam all along.
The social distancing thing really puts a hamper on.
Yeah. I also really
isolation from people really makes the brain go to weird places. Especially when you finally get some interaction with people, and I say that knowing, of course, that some of us have family and significant others that live with us, but whatever.
Yeah. I'm just really happy I got to talk about phone tonight.
Yeah.
Super
Man,
excited.
I've been watching you play it over on the Share Play. And that's been super nice. I'm not gonna lie. Outside of the time range, why? I don't understand that.
Yeah. I mean, technically, I'll probably stream on Twitch. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I was like, I don't want anybody interacting. Talk to my buddy. Have an audio over.
I barely talk to you guys, let alone other people. But please let us know what your ideas are on the perfect remaster or the definition of a remaster or a remake in the comments floating slightly above me.
Below!
Like a little angel that is in the shape of Cloud as he descends his sword upon Midgard. But I believe it's time for last call.
Last call!
You delayed the call. That is your fault.
That was real bad. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. It wasn't me. I don't blame you.
I'm always interested to see how it shows up in post when I edit it, because it has no resemblance of how we hear it right now.
So, of course, we do have our own special guest. I'm sitting Sam Adams 76. It's a hoppier version of their Boston Lager, along with some Jameson Black Barrel. Because if you're having a beer, you got to have a shot of whiskey.
Hipster Sam Adams is what I like to call that. It's what Sam Adams would be.
You ain't wrong, boy.
What
about you guys? You got the 4 Roses over there, Mark?
4 Roses, Yellow Label, big old handle of it. But
man,
Jesus,
it's okay. It's got a harder bite than I guess I would normally be used to, as opposed to like I thought I had the bottle here. I don't. Of the Woodford Reserve or the Glenlivet Founders Reserve or Founders Select that I normally do, but honestly, it's not bad. Like I had some problems with the 4 Roses small batch before, but I enjoy this. It's actually not bad.
What's crazy is that you drank all of that down to the line, like from the start of the podcast.
Yeah, I know. It's like you guys haven't seen it because like I'm doing really great in post, and I'm just like cutting out the parts where I'm swinging this back. But no.
Of course, you can reach out to us via the comment section of this video, or you can reach out to us on Discord. We have the link in our description. Please feel free to join us. We are 139 strong, I believe. It's probably more than that. I'm always.
I think it was 142 last I looked, but
I believe you entirely. For the weekly reading, I did want to talk about the fact that there's a wonderful article coming from Vice about whether or not Leisure Suit Larry, the 80s very pornographic, horny PC game, whether or not it was an accomplice in early banking cyber attacks.
What?
Was it? You'll have to read the article to find out. Very entertaining. The weekly deals include a humble bundle with 2K, where 2K is pay what you want bundle. So for $20, you get 5, 9, 13 games total, including Spec Ops The Line, Sid Meier's Pirate, the BioShock Collection, NBA 2K20, WWE 2K20, and the Borderlands Hands of Jack Collection.
They can't give that game away.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. There, I mean, for literally $20, you get access to 13 games on your PC. Well worth it, in my opinion. Opinion. Of course, we also have some cool ass shit. I have been playing Final Fantasy VII Remake. I don't know if you can tell because all the time, the voice actress for one of the main characters, Aerith, actually played through the game herself. She is a content creator. She actually streams quite a bit and played through the section where she ran into her characters for the first time as an emotional video.
Was that the girl that was crying?
Yeah.
Oh,
really cool.
That was so good.
Jeez.
It was really good. She breaks down in tears watching her character. It's very cool. And then PT has been recreated in a very interesting way using HyperCard software. So you should look in that. It's black and white. Still terrifying. Still terrifying.
Put recreate PT on.
I'm sure they did. It's recreated everywhere because we all want it. They all give it to us. While you locked up, of course, now Google Stadia is now free for anyone with a Gmail address. You can hook up a controller of your choice up to your PC or use the keyboard if you want and play as long as you want. And then you get 2 months free for the Stadia Pro if you sign up.
Oh, cool.
Interesting.
So, and then PlayStation is also giving away 2 classics for free for 1 month. Journey and the
Uncharted Collection.
Yeah, the Nathan Drake Collection are both available starting tomorrow for PlayStation 4 owners. You are able to play through those games for the entire month for free via Sony. They said they're going to probably continue to do this as long as self-quarantine and COVID continues to go out. It is part of their $100 million they're putting towards relief.
Yeah, I was about to say there was a lot of talk about them putting out a lot of.
Yeah, so they put $10,000 into or $10 million in charity. Some of this is going to devs to get rid of games. Now, some of these are self-published by Sony, some of these aren't, but they're going to continue to give relief as time goes on. So that's pretty cool. You have stuff to do while you locked up. Finally, we do have our question of the week, which is, what is your go-to when you can't decide what to do? I got 3 of them.
I know Mark's.
Oh, I know Mark's.
I hate you guys. Go ahead.
Okay.
Chicken.
So I got a combination of Twitter or 9gag. Now, Twitter is very political these days, which is understandable because we live in a very trying time. We have for a long time.
How else will I get my political news?
Almost 4 years, really. It's interesting that it's coincided with that election. So there are times where Twitter is just too political for me. So 9gag's a nice relief where it's just memes. I also tend to just literally peruse any streaming service that I own or I have access to add to a list. It is so cathartic to go in.
That I never use.
If you want an interesting place to go to, there's an app or website called Just Watch.
Okay.
That has lists from HBO, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, whatever, that kind of thing, all the streaming services, and you create an account and select all the services that you have access to. And it will list if you search for a particular thing, or if you wanted to browse through what's popular and whatnot, you can go through there and it'll do it across all the streaming services at once.
That's pretty cool. I like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
They have a mobile app, website, the whole deal.
Okay. What's it called again?
Just Watch.
Just Watch. And then my final thing is reading manga. So the Shonen Jump app, I pay $2 a month. I get an entire backlog. And recently I've been rereading some of my favorites, including Bleach, where I am now on chapter 480 something. I am.
You're still not done?
Listen, I'm playing Final Fantasy VII Remake, okay? My time is about. But those are my go-tos when I'd literally.
Yeah, I have to say manga is definitely, especially in the. It's one of my favorite things to do. Twitter. Twitter is really a political tool now, which is kind of like starting to bother me, but at the same time, like it's fun to
Thanks, Obama.
Thanks, Obama.
But so far, most of my stuff, like I'm hardly ever bored. I've always got something to do, whether I'm going to a friend's house and cutting down his trees or yard work or whatever. Like almost every little bit of leisure time I get goes to games or hanging out with you guys. So most of my leisure time, I guess extra time you call it, is just be me, Shonen Jump, Twitter, and then I catch up on my phone call. So if I ever call you, probably on the can.
Nice.
Fun fact of the day: I had a tree fall in my front yard. Totally not related to John's topic.
Wow. All right. So with the whole lock-in thing anyway, and some ideas anyway in development, and just because this is my nature anyway, I love development, I love doing my own projects, that kind of thing. I always have something to work on. Like for production lately, we've got a project anyway. We've been wanting something built that doesn't exist currently, so I've been looking into doing research and building out for that. So actually it's something, ironically, actually, because I've my monitor set up anyway. I've got my laptop sitting here with one monitor tied to it. I've got all my code up for that right now, sitting next to the camera. But it's something I was working on today, actually. So I enjoy doing that kind of stuff. That's always my go-to, regardless. Anyway, so I've just had more time to devote into this anyway. But other than that, movies are always my go-to. So I have Plex with my server full of movies downstairs that are always available, regardless of whether we're online, offline, whatever the deal is. I always have something I can watch, and always something I enjoy watching. I mean, I've regaled, I've talked about my love for Jake Gyllenhaal anyway, and his acting anyway for a while now.
You've talked about it.
So that's like I've got pictures are above the holes on your walls.
I've got that's wow. I've got End of Watch. I've got Jarhead. I've got whatever I want to watch. Nightcrawler. I've got all kinds of stuff anyway that I wanted to watch. Yeah. Watch Nightcrawler if you haven't. It's a really creepy movie, but it's awesome.
It is. It's very good.
But like I recommend watching any of it, that kind of thing. Like I've got tons of movies available to me, that kind of thing. If I really want to watch something, like for example, today I watched The Report for the first time. I've never watched The Report with Adam Driver.
Yeah.
So like that's available on Amazon Prime currently if you're watching. But I would go check that out. It's kind of a dry movie because it is political, but it's a very good movie about what happened. So it's something I'd check out. And that kind of thing. So like along the same lines, I'll peruse through Prime, through Netflix, through whatever, and find something decent.
Definitely done that. Please let us know what you do with your time. Probably in the comment section, floating above Mark like an angry storm.
Below.
But until next time. Cheers.
Cheers.